A young waitress does something that nobody thought was possible. She stands up to a man everyone else was afraid of. And his response? It changes everything. Her name was Maya Torres, and she was just a waitress. Well, she was just a waitress. That was before the night everything changed, before she did something stupid that turned out to be the smartest thing she ever did, before she learned that sometimes standing up for yourself is the only thing that matters. Hit that like button right now. What happens next will shock you. It all happened at Vinny's Italian restaurant in Queens, New York. You know the place. It's been around for 30 years. Red leather booths, white tablecloths, the kind of place where old guys in expensive suits come to eat pasta and talk about stuff they shouldn't be talking about in public. Maya had worked at Vinny's for almost 3 years. She'd started when she was 19, fresh out of high school, needing money for community college. Her mom had diabetes, and her little brother had learning disabilities that needed special tutoring. Her dad had left when she was 7, so it was just her trying to keep everything together. The job at Vinny's paid okay, and the tips were usually pretty good, especially from the businessman types who came in the evenings. What Maya didn't know, what nobody seemed to talk about directly, was that a lot of those businessmen weren't really businessmen. The restaurant had a thing, a reputation, not the kind you advertised, but the kind everybody in the neighborhood knew about. Certain tables in the back corner, certain private meetings that happened between courses, certain conversations that stopped the moment anyone who didn't belong got close enough to listen. On her first day, Maya's manager, Tony, had pulled her aside and told her the rules. You see something, you don't see it. You hear something, you didn't hear it. You keep your head down, you do your job, and nobody bothers you. You ask questions, then we have problems. Maya had got the message. She'd kept her head down. But there's a limit to how much you can keep your head down. That limit was about to be reached. It was a Tuesday night in March. The restaurant was slow, which meant Maya actually had time to breathe between tables. She was working the back section, the private section, where the real power players came to eat. The section where conversations stopped when she approached and started again when she left. Around 7 o'clock, everything changed. Not in a way you could see, but in a way you could feel. Like the air got heavier, like everyone had suddenly remembered that they should be careful, like something dangerous had just walked through the door. Vinny DeMarcus had arrived. Everyone in Queens knew who Vinny DeMarcus was. You didn't grow up in the neighborhood without knowing about him. He ran things, not just the restaurant business, but other stuff too. The kind of stuff that people didn't talk about directly, but everyone kind of knew about anyway. The stuff that happened in the shadows and on the streets and in conversations that were cut short when the wrong person walked by. He was in his 60s, but he looked like the kind of guy who could still hurt you if he wanted to. Dark gray hair slicked back, gold watch that probably cost more than Maya's car, 3 rings on his fingers, 1 on each ring finger and 1 on his pinky. He wore a black button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled up and an expensive suit jacket draped over his shoulders like he was a movie villain or something. With him were 4 other guys, younger. They wore suits, but they weren't trying to look rich. They were trying to look dangerous. You could tell the difference. The rich guys dressed to show off. These guys dressed to tell you to stay out of their way. Tony, Maya's manager, rushed over personally. He was shaking a little bit, which was weird because Tony never got nervous about anything, not normally. But now, watching Vinny walk toward the best table in the back corner, Tony's hands were trembling. "Mr. DeMarcus," Tony said, bowing his head a little. "It's an honor, sir. Your usual table is ready. We have the special cuts of meat tonight. Would you like me to have the chef prepare something special?" Vinny didn't even look at Tony. He just pointed at the best table in the corner with 1 long finger and sat down. His guys sat around him like he was the king or something, like this was a throne room instead of a restaurant. Maya was assigned to their table, which meant she was about to have the worst shift of her life. Maya walked over to their table with her notepad and her professional smile, the smile she'd practiced 1,000,000 times, the one that says, "I'm here to serve you," without saying anything else. She was trying to look confident, but her hands were shaking a little. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, keeping her voice steady even though she wasn't feeling steady at all. "Welcome to Vinny's. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The other four guys looked at Maya, and she could feel them checking her out, not in a nice way, in a way that made her feel small and uncomfortable. She could see their eyes moving over her like she was an object, not a person, like she was something to evaluate. Vinny, though, he looked at her like he didn't see her at all, like she was a piece of furniture, like she was something that existed only to serve him. His gaze was cold and dismissive, the way you'd look at a tool you needed but didn't really care about. "Bring me your best wine," he said. His voice was rough, like he smoked a lot, or maybe just like he'd spent his whole life yelling at people. "The expensive stuff, and bring water, cold water, ice cold." "Of course, sir. I'll be right back." She turned to leave, and that's when it happened. Vinny grabbed her arm, not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough that Maya understood she didn't have a choice about where she was going. His hand was on her wrist, and his grip was tight, and she could feel the gold rings digging into her skin. It didn't hurt exactly, but it sent a message that said, "You belong to me right now." Maya's first feeling was fear, real, actual, physical fear. Her second feeling was anger. Anger that this guy thought he could just touch her without asking. Anger that she'd spent 3 years keeping her head down and being invisible, and it still wasn't enough. Anger that there were rules for people like him and completely different rules for people like her, and nobody seemed to think that was a problem. Anger that this was just normal, that this was expected, that nobody would stop him. "Let go of my arm," she said.
Let go of my hand.
She didn't yell,
What did you say?
she didn't scream.
You can't touch
she
me
just
like that.
said it, clear and firm, like it was a fact, like it wasn't even a question, like she was telling him something obvious that he should have already known. Vinny's eyes got sharp, sharper than they'd been before, like she'd done something dangerous, like she'd broken some rule that everyone was supposed to follow without being told. "What did you say to me, girl?" Vinny asked, not angry yet, just curious in a way that made Maya's stomach drop. "Yeah, I know who you are, and I still don't want you grabbing me." Vinny let go of Maya's arm, not because she told him to, not because he was afraid of her or anything like that. He let go because he was surprised, because in his whole life probably nobody had ever talked to him like that, not directly, not without being afraid, not without backing down the moment he pushed back. He sat back in his chair and he looked at Maya for a long time, long enough that she started to get nervous again, long enough that she wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life, long enough that other staff members watched from a distance, their faces tense and worried. Then Vinny smiled. And it wasn't the smile of someone who thought something was funny. It was the smile of someone who was impressed. "What's your name?" Vinny asked. "Maya," she said. "Maya what?" "Maya Torres." He nodded, like he was filing the information away in his head for later, like he was remembering her. "You know," he said, "I respect that. I respect when someone has the guts to say what they think, even when it's not smart. Even when it might get them in trouble." The whole restaurant was still quiet. Everyone was wondering what was about to happen. Would he hurt her? Would he have her fired? Would he do something worse? "You're going to bring me my wine," Vinny said, "and you're going to bring my friends what they want, and you're going to do it with the same attitude. You're not going to kiss our asses. You're not going to pretend we're special. You're just going to do your job. You understand?" "Yes, sir," Maya said. "Good," Vinny said. "And Maya, next time a man grabs you, any man, you hit him, okay? You hit him and you don't apologize for it. That's important. You hear me?" Maya nodded. She didn't totally understand what was happening, but she understood that she should say yes. Maya went to get their wine and their drinks. She brought back the expensive stuff, a bottle that cost more than her weekly paycheck. She poured it carefully, her hands steady now. She took their orders. She didn't hover around their table. She didn't ask if everything was okay every 2 seconds. She just did her job, the way she always did, but with something different now. Something like she had permission to be herself instead of pretending to be invisible. And something weird happened. They actually seemed to enjoy it. Vinny's guys laughed more, they were less tense, they ordered more food, they stayed longer. It was like giving them permission to be normal people instead of scary guys who people had to treat special, made them actually want to be better, made them forget, for a moment, what they actually were. When they left, Vinny left a $500 tip on a $300 bill. Tony's eyes went wide when he saw it. He'd never seen anyone leave that much money. "What did you do?" he asked Maya, confused. "Nothing," she said. "I just served them." But they both knew it was more than that. Here's where the story gets crazy. About a week later, there's a knock on Maya's family's door. It's early morning, and everyone is scared because bad news usually comes in the morning. Maya's mom has already started thinking about medical emergencies. Her brother is thinking about school problems. But when Maya opens the door, it's not bad news. It's 2 men in suits, and they look official, but not police official. Federal official. FBI. "Maya Torres?" one of them asks. She nods, and her heart is pounding because she's thinking about Vinny DeMarcus and that night and wondering if she's in trouble. "We need to talk to you about Vinny DeMarcus," the agent says. It turns out, and this is the part that nobody at the restaurant knew, that the FBI had been investigating Vinny for years. They had recordings, they had informants on the inside, they had enough evidence to put him away for a long time. But the problem was this: all the people who could testify against him were terrified. They wanted to talk to the FBI, but they were scared that Vinny would hurt them, or hurt their families, or make them disappear. So the case was stuck. Nobody would talk. Nobody would take the risk. Then Maya grabbed his arm in the restaurant, and according to the FBI, that moment changed everything. "You stood up to him," Agent Morrison told Maya and her mother, sitting in their small apartment with the blinds drawn. "You didn't back down, you didn't apologize, and he respected you for it. That's unusual. That's very unusual. That's important." "What do you mean?" Maya asked. "We mean," Agent Morrison said, leaning forward, "that we want you to help us. We want you to wear a wire. We want to record conversations at the restaurant. We want to get evidence that we can use in court." Maya's mom freaked out immediately. She stood up from the kitchen table. "Absolutely not," she said. "This is too dangerous. My daughter is not getting involved with the FBI and the mob. That's insane. That's not happening." But Maya thought about it. She thought about her brother and his tutoring and how expensive everything was. She thought about all the people in the neighborhood who were scared of Vinny DeMarcus. She thought about how he'd told her to stand up for herself, and how maybe she needed to actually do that, even if it was scary, even if it meant betraying a man who'd shown her respect. "I'll do it," she said. Her mom looked at her like she was crazy, and maybe she was crazy. But she was also angry, and anger is a good motivator sometimes. For the next 3 months, Maya wore a wire to work. It was a tiny thing, hidden under her uniform where nobody could see it. Just a small device tucked into a specially designed bra where security cameras and suspicious eyes couldn't detect it. The FBI gave her instructions about how to talk, how to ask questions that would get him to say stuff they could use. They told her to stay safe, to not do anything dangerous, to just keep it normal. They told her that if anything felt wrong, she could abort the mission. But Maya never did. Vinny kept coming in. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he'd come in with his guys and he'd sit at his table in the back corner and he'd eat and he'd talk about stuff. And Maya would listen to everything. He talked about money that came from places money shouldn't come from. He talked about people who owed him money. He talked about what he was going to do to people if they didn't pay. He talked about bribing cops and judges. He talked about shipments of things that weren't legal. He talked about all of it, right there in a public restaurant, because he thought nobody important was listening. But Maya was listening, and so was the FBI, through the tiny wire taped to her body. The thing is, Vinny was actually nice to Maya the whole time. He'd ask how her mom was doing, he'd ask about her brother's school, he'd compliment her service, he'd tell her she was doing a good job, he'd leave huge tips, he'd treat her like she was important, like her time mattered, which made the whole thing weird, because Maya actually started to like him in a strange and complicated way. But she knew what he was, and she knew what he'd done, and she knew that the things he was saying into the wire were going to put him in prison for the rest of his life. She had nightmares about it sometimes, nightmares where he looked at her with those cold eyes and said, "I know what you did," and she woke up shaking. But she kept wearing the wire. The FBI came one morning and told Maya it was done. They had enough. They were going to arrest Vinny. The investigation was over. "Will he know it was me?" Maya asked. She was sitting in an FBI office surrounded by gray walls and fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. Agent Morrison was quiet for a long time. "Probably," she said. "Eventually. We're going to try to protect you, but he's smart. He'll figure it out." Maya was scared, like real scared, the kind of scared where you can't sleep because your brain won't stop thinking about what might happen, what Vinny might do if he found out, whether she'd made a mistake, whether she'd destroyed something important. But the next day, Vinny was arrested. It was on every news channel, FBI raids, organized crime busts, federal indictments, all of it. The headline was, "Mafiaboss arrested after 3-month investigation." There were pictures of police cars and agents in FBI jackets, and Vinny being led away in handcuffs, his face showing nothing. They didn't mention Maya anywhere. The wire was kept secret. The information about how they got the evidence was kept confidential to protect her. She'd become invisible again, just another waitress who'd served a guy in a restaurant. Nobody knew that she was the one who'd brought him down. Her co-workers at the restaurant asked questions. What happened? They wanted to know. Did you know? But Maya just shook her head and said no, she didn't know anything. She lied to protect herself. 6 months after Vinny's arrest, Maya received a letter, in the mail, addressed to her, no return address. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a letter from Vinny. He was in federal prison, locked away in a cell, and somehow he'd managed to write to her. The handwriting was careful and precise, like he'd rewritten it several times to make sure it was right. It said, "Dear Maya, you wore a wire. I know you did. I'm not angry about it. I want you to understand something. When you stood up to me in the restaurant that night, you did something that reminded me who I used to be, before I became this person, before I started thinking of myself as untouchable. I told you to stand up for yourself, and you did. You just stood up to me. I respect that. I really do. I'm going to tell you something because I think you deserve the truth. The FBI didn't build their case on the wire alone. There was an informant inside my organization, someone close to me, someone I trusted. He's the one who gave them the real evidence, the real damaging stuff. The wire was just confirmation, just extra proof." So don't think your actions changed everything, because they didn't. The case was already built. I was already going down. What you did, what the wire gave them, was just insurance, just a backup plan. But I want you to know something else. Your bravery, not the wire, but that moment when you grabbed my arm back, that's what made me think I could trust you. That's what made me treat you like you were important. That's what made me not hurt you or the people you love, and maybe that's what saved you. Take care of yourself. Don't let what you did here define you. You did what you had to do, and that's okay. Vinny. Maya read that letter about 100 times. She still doesn't totally understand what it means. Was he saying that he would have hurt her or her family if she hadn't stood up to him? Was he saying that her courage literally protected her? Or was he trying to mess with her head from inside a prison cell? The FBI agents wanted Maya to give them the letter. They wanted to know what it meant. They wanted to analyze it and file it away as evidence of something. But Maya kept it. She doesn't really know why. It felt important somehow, like it was something between her and Vinny, like it was the real ending of the story, not the public arrest or the trial or any of that. Maya's mom got better. The medical bills were finally getting paid off. Her brother finished high school and got into a good college. He was going to study engineering. Maya used the money that the government gave her for being a witness to pay for community college, and then she transferred to a real university. She started studying criminal justice because she wanted to understand how the system works, how people like her can actually make a difference. She's not a waitress anymore. Now she works for a nonprofit that helps people who witness crime come forward safely. She helps other people do what she did, stand up for themselves, take risks for justice, tell the truth even when it's scary. Vinny DeMarcus died in federal prison 2 years ago. Heart attack. He was 58. He was serving a 30-year sentence, and he didn't make it halfway through. Sometimes Maya thinks about that night when she told him, "You can't touch me like that." She thinks about how he could have crushed her, how he could have made her life miserable, how instead he respected her for it. She doesn't know if that was real or if it was manipulation. She doesn't know if she was brave or stupid or lucky or all three. But she knows this: the moment she stopped being invisible, the moment she said, "No, this is not okay," everything changed. Not because she was special, but because she refused to act like she wasn't important, because she refused to be treated like an object, because she said no. And maybe that's the real power. Not force, not money, not connections to important people, just the simple act of saying, "I matter too." What people didn't know, what wasn't in any of the news articles, was that Vinny's case opened a lot of doors. With him gone and his operation broken, other people started talking. Other witnesses who'd been too scared before, other victims who thought they'd never get justice, other people who worked in restaurants and shops and offices, people who'd seen things and heard things and kept their heads down. Now they came forward. The investigation spread to federal corruption, to judges who'd been taking bribes, to cops who were part of the operation, to politicians who'd turned a blind eye. 12 more arrests followed Vinny's, millions of dollars in seized assets, real change in the community, real justice. And it all started because a young waitress looked a mafia boss in the eye and said no. Not with a gun, not with government power, not with training or backup or any advantage at all. Just with her voice, just with her refusal to be invisible, just with her willingness to risk everything for what was right. The Chen Institute for Justice wasn't the only organization that grew from Maya's actions. The New York Police Department changed how they handled witness protection. The FBI changed their training programs. Community organizations started working with restaurant workers to help them recognize and report crime. Maya Torres became a symbol, though she never wanted to be one. She became proof that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. If this story made you feel something, smash that like button. Subscribe because there are more stories like this. And comment, what would you have done? Would you have been brave enough to say no to someone that scary? Share this with someone who needs to know that they matter, that their voice matters, that standing up for yourself isn't stupid, it's the bravest thing you can do. Share this with someone who works in service, with someone who feels invisible, because they need to know that their voice can change everything.